In today's video, we're talking all things high-end spring and summer decor. I've compiled a list of 50 DIY decor projects for you guys to utilize during the spring and summer months, with the first several being ones you have not seen. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Before you go out and feel the pressure to buy all new things, consider transforming things that you already have. Some of you might remember when I found this almost like a milk glass bunny dish container, and it was perfect for last year, but I wanted to give it a more patinaed brass look. You could definitely find patinaed brass pieces at antique stores, at thrift stores. Most recently found this sweet little bud vase that looked so similar to the one from Magnolia, as well as this piece here. Perfect for shelf styling. But a piece that I really wanted that is now sold out was this patinaed brass bunny container. And remembering that I had this piece here that was very similar in shape, we're just going to achieve that look with a very simple painting technique. Started off with just a few coats of this metallic gold spray paint, letting that dry, and then going over that with some matte brown acrylic paint with a foam brush. Then going over that with some watered down black paint. Just as that begins to dry, add a layer of flour to mattify the whole look. The final step is to go in with the acrylic paint called Champagne Gold, just to again give it a more vintage feel. All of these supplies I already had on hand, as well as of course the bunny container. Now it's not an identical dupe, but it is overall really similar, and the best part about it all is that I didn't have to spend any additional money. I know that florals for spring isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but I think it's the way that you do it that can make it feel a little bit more personal and special to you. So when it comes to textiles, floral pillows from high-end stores can be really expensive. And one thing you can pretty much always find at the thrift store is floral printed fabric. And even if it's not in the fabric section, look through all of the clothing, all of the fabric there, because that can essentially be transformed into any pillow or any other textile you might be wanting for your space. I've recently been loving the shape of this round pillow that has just one button in the middle, almost like a tufted look. I love the one from Lulu & Georgia, but it is almost $100. So I was trying to think of a way of how I can get this look for a whole lot less. Starting off with a round placemat that I had from last year, I'm just going to remove that finishing trim so I can apply that after I apply the new fabric. And also, if you happen to find a placemat that you already really like the shape of, all you essentially have to do is fill that placemat and then add the button, which I'll share with you later. Because this pattern is just a little too vibrant for me, I decided to set that one off to the side, but still use the backing so I can use it for this fabric. This was just a t-shirt that I found at my thrift store, but I loved the print and the pattern because I have this olive green chair that you guys might remember in my living room space, and it is the exact tone of that green shade that I'm really looking for. Placing the back of the placemat on top of my fabric, just going to remove it so I have two identical pieces of fabric, so that way I can pin them and then buzz them through the sewing machine. If you don't have a sewing machine or know how to hand sew, there are a lot of different ways you can achieve this look using fabric-specific adhesives. After those two pieces of fabric have then been sewn together, I'm also going to sew most of this trim piece around as well, pinning that to the fabric. Then now taking that through my sewing machine, leaving an opening at the top so I'll be able to still fill the pillow, but the majority of the pillow is already completed. For the filling, you can essentially use anything, but I just decided to use an old pillow that I was getting ready to donate and took the stuffing from that. Or you can of course buy an insert from Amazon. After the pillow's been completely filled in, then now it's just time to add our button detail. So the first thing I did was take the button, hand sew it into place, and then to stack on top of that so it looks nice and finished, we're going to take another button, recover that, and that way it just looks nice and seamless. While I still definitely like the one from Lulu & Georgia better, I think that for a few dollars, I'm able to achieve a pretty similar look. If you've ever been inside of a pottery barn, you'll know that during this time of year you'll start to see all of the rattan and woven seagrass pieces really become a prevalent material used, especially now. And these are expensive. Just for a decorative item, it's $250. And I think we can achieve a pretty similar look, but much more cost effective. So essentially all that you'll need for this is any type of a sphere. So you could use a globe, you could use a bowling ball, you could use old ornaments that you're getting ready to donate. I find large scale ornaments often at the Goodwill bins and they're pennies on the dollar. Something I like to do beforehand, it's not completely necessary, but I think it gives you a more finished look at the end, is just to paint your spheres similar enough in color to whatever woven material you are going to use. I ordered this spool of seagrass from Amazon. I think it was around $14 and you get a ton of it. In order to apply your seagrass material, I like to do a combination of hot glue and spray adhesive just so you get a nice strong hold overall over everything. You can use Mod Podge. I just think it takes a little bit longer to dry, but if that's all you have, that would also work. It's a very simple, straightforward DIY project. It is a little bit time consuming, but the savings overall is worth the time spent in order to get an overall really similar look. Another piece that's basically been living rent-free in my mind for about the last month or so has been this bunny catch-all tray from McGee & Co. It's not that expensive, it's only $30, but I thought that I would be able to maybe create something similar on a budget. Found this one here for just $1.25. Also found the clay at the Goodwill outlet. In order to make this otherwise plain scalloped tray feel a little bit more seasonal, we're going to create a mold out of clay based on the shape and silhouette of that bunny shown on McGee & Co.'s website. So I just kept referring back to what that bunny looked like, and I kept tailoring mine to get it to look as close as possible. What's really great about a project like this, you literally can't mess this up because you just keep working with it until you're completely happy with the end result. I let that dry for 24 hours because it was an air dry clay, and then I took it outside and spray painted it first with brass spray paint and then went over that with some matte black spray paint to give it a more distressed look. Of course, it's not going to be identical, but I think it's pretty close for just a few dollars. One of the most expensive purchases I think people make during springtime especially is investing in a really beautiful wreath for your front door. But often it doesn't have to be this huge investment from Pottery Barn or McGee & Co. You can find really beautiful spring wreaths at the thrift store if you just keep checking. For example, I found this smaller wreath here that was 16 inches in diameter. Decided to pick that one up because it was so reminiscent of this one from McGee & Co. Obviously the one from McGee & Co. is much larger, but it is also $178. In order to make this nice but kind of small wreath feel a little bit more substantial and high-end is to stack another wreath on top of it. So I found this one at the Goodwill bins. It was only a few dollars. The first thing I needed to do after cleaning it was just to remove any of the florals that I didn't plan on including in my more neutral wreath. So I removed but then saved the lavender as well as some of the florals that were just pulling a little bit too yellow. Whenever you're combining a larger and a smaller wreath together, you just want to make sure they're at least 4 inches different in diameter. In my case, they were 6 inches different, and that worked out really well. You just want to make sure you're going to have enough space for your smaller wreath to sit inside. And then in order to connect them, you could use floral wire here. I just prefer to use zip ties. I think you just get a stronger hold and it's a lot faster. One thing you'll notice, wreaths from Terrain, Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, the hole in the middle of their wreaths is very small, and that is because you are paying a lot, but you're getting a nice, full, large-scale wreath. So just by combining a few wreaths from the thrift store together, you can achieve the same look for just about $10. One material used really often in spring decorating especially is moss. There's moss wreaths, moss topiaries, centerpieces, and of course all the bunnies. If you have moss balls that are 3 different sizes at home, or if you thrift them, you can turn this into a bunny really easily just by simply taking some wire. I just took one from an old hanger. Start with the largest size ball at the bottom and then put your mid-size ball on top of that, connecting it with wire, and then take your smallest one and then just form that into some ears for your bunny. Small little pieces like these, and also like the first project with the tray, they're just small little nods to the season without being overwhelming. However, if you are in the market and looking for some really nice large scale bunny topiaries, or really any topiaries, you can do this so simply using thrifted or Dollar Tree materials. I ended up finding 4 bowls for less than $1 at the Goodwill bins, but the tutorial that I followed made this an entirely Dollar Tree project. Starting off with the 2 bigger bowls, it doesn't really matter if they're exactly the same because we're going to cover them with moss anyhow. First, I needed to weigh down this bottom section here, so I just filled mine with sand. You could fill it with concrete or any kind of stone mix just to make sure that it is weighed down and it won't tip over. Just used some super glue gel to connect each matching bowl to each other, and then also connected the smaller bowl on top of then the larger bowl. I also grabbed this styrofoam half, and I just took a small section from the top of it as well as the bunny ears from the Dollar Tree, and I connected those 2 pieces together, covered it all with moss, and it should look something like this. I did decide to spray paint mine all one color, but you definitely don't have to. I just did so in case you would see some of those colors poking through. In her tutorial, she did use hot glue and it seemed to work out fine for her. I just opted for the Gorilla Glue spray adhesive. That just made it a little bit faster and easier, and it stuck on really well. Even at affordable stores like Walmart, these can cost $35 and up. Anytime I see moss at the Goodwill bins, I always grab it and pay pennies on the dollar for it. You can absolutely just go the Dollar Tree route though and make sure that all of your moss is exactly the same. I kind of liked that mine was just slightly different in certain spots. When all of the moss was applied, I then added a coat of spray adhesive on top just to make sure everything stayed put. You could definitely just stop here, but I wanted to embellish it just a little bit, so I grabbed this lace ribbon here and then attached the bow onto that piece. Totally a personal preference. You can take this as far as you want to go. Under $10 for a really substantial piece of outdoor spring decor is very hard to come by when you shop retail, but if you thrift it and if you DIY it, you'll get there really easily. In addition to moss, another material especially used through Pottery Barn is a lot of grapevine pieces. And one thing you can probably make using stuff you already have is take a balloon, blow it up as big as you can so that way you get kind of the shape of an egg. And then I found this material here at the bottom of the bins, and I thought this would be perfect to make several of these oversized rattan or grapevine, twine, whatever you have on hand. Make several of these for some outdoor decor for Easter. Started off by just wrapping the material soaked in Mod Podge and water around the balloon, and I continued to do that until I was pretty happy with how much material was there. Came back in the next day to pop the balloon so that way I can remove it from the inside, and then you're basically just left with something that looks like an egg. What I love about a project like this is you can make several of these for just a few dollars, and they can look so similar. You can even add lights to these if you really wanted to amp this DIY up, but a very simple, straightforward project that anybody can really do. The next one isn't really a project, but it's something I wanted to make sure to mention because it can really amp up your styling when it comes to styling for the spring season. While you're out thrifting, keep your eyes out for a smaller basket that looks exactly like this one, because you can fill this with so many spring related items like moss balls, or if you find any sort of eggs. I came across these really beautiful wooden eggs at the thrift store. I'm contemplating staining some of them just to give it a little bit more variation. I've also found marble eggs in the past, and of course florals, which is what we will be doing in this case. I went to my local grocery store and I grabbed some potted florals here. You just want to make sure that your pots are lower than the height of the bottom part of your basket. You could pop this on any shelf, and everybody knows just by looking at this decor piece alone that spring is here. Which brings me to my next point, which is just finding seasonal planters. Pottery Barn carries these for a small fortune. Even going the home goods route, you're going to spend at least $15 all the way up to $40 for some seasonal decor that you're only going to keep out for a few months. Which is why I love going to the thrift store, because you can find nearly identical things in terms of shape to the things you'll find at Home Goods or at Marshall's or at Pottery Barn, but you might just have to do some painting techniques to get there. My favorite combination, if you're ever trying to get something that is ceramic or porcelain look like stone, you have to add something like mortar or just something that has some grit and texture to it, like baking soda, sand. I know they do have a stone spray paint. I'm gonna be honest, it's not my favorite. It takes forever to dry and it's almost too perfect looking. After mixing my grout with my white acrylic paint, I then took a small bristle brush and brushed the whole thing over at least twice so everything's really well covered. And then just to distress it a little bit, you could use brown acrylic paint, you could use gray, you could use even like a green color if you wanted to give it a different patina, but basically anything to give it a more aged and weathered look. And why I love these seasonal planters and decor pieces is because it's just an easy shelf styling swap. I always have this plant on my shelf that's just in like a normal planter, but now I can put it in this one again, and it adds a little bit more of that seasonality to my space. I always love a free project. So one thing I've been seeing pop up on different websites are these totes for, as if you were going to like a floral market, that you would have this bag ready and available. I think this is such a cute concept. And I almost bought the one from the Hearth and Hand line, but decided I'm just gonna try to make one on my own. Our local grocery store here in Ohio has these just thin paper bags here. I'm basically just going to use this as a pattern or a template for our canvas tote bag. And to cover it, I just wanted to use something that I already had. So I had this drop cloth in my stash, just going to remove a small section from this drop cloth and leaving a little bit of excess so that way when I add the spray adhesive, I'll have enough to completely cover it. Just smoothed it out, pressed it into place, and removed any excess from the back. I also needed to make an opening before covering up the other side where the pieces connect into each other, as well as mark where the handles were originally. Added the spray adhesive to the other side, and then I just needed to again trim off the excess. I had this suede ribbon in my stash, so I'm going to use that for the handles as well as just a decorative accent to the bottom. And that really wrapped it up for this project. It was super straightforward and easy to do and essentially free. Another category that I like to include in subtle ways in my spring decorating are tennis-related decor. I'm also seeing this be more prevalent. It's on McGee & Co. and Pottery Barn as well, especially for the spring months. And one thing you can pretty much always find at the thrift store, no matter how bad your thrift store is, you can always find at least one tennis racket, and they're usually $1 or $2. So you could simply just put these up on the wall, but I wanted to kind of do something functional with the tennis racket. So I had also thrifted at the Goodwill outlet these cork sheets. I wanted to turn this tennis racket into a linen pin board. Started off by just taping the bottom off and using some textured black spray paint to cover up any letters or any designs that were distracting from the overall look I'm trying to achieve. Through the tennis racket onto the cork sheet, I'm making marks around what the inside will be, then just connecting those markings together before I cut it out. I left a little bit of room for the fabric we're going to place on top of the cork just to give it a more finished look. You could even take this a step further and add a more spring related fabric, but I again like to keep things pretty neutral, so I just went in with this white linen fabric that I thrifted, and I'm just going to wrap the cork around it before we attach it to the tennis racket. Using some spray adhesive, just going to give a generous coat onto the cork and then press that fabric on, making sure it's nice and smooth throughout. With the front of the fabric attached, I'm just going to go around now with my hot glue gun and attach the remainder of the fabric to all of the sides so it just looks nice and finished. Removed any of the excess fabric and then just pressed it into place. Because it's such a tight fit, you shouldn't have to glue anything. If you're just trying to fill out one little nook like I am here, I think one is fine. But if you're trying to fill up a big wall, I would just stack several of these like the print from McGee & Co, but instead it can be a little bit more functional and personal to you, and of course so much more cost effective because you've made something using secondhand materials. Woven materials for me just read a little bit more spring and summer than they do fall and winter. So if you ever come across pieces like this, even if you're not in need of that specific item, look past what the item is, because this can be so many different things. You can split these up and just use one of the baskets or two of the baskets. But in this case, I wanted to make a woven chandelier. Started off by removing the pieces that connected to each other. We're just gonna set that off to the side. Some of the baskets were a little misshapen. This happens sometimes, especially at the Goodwill bins. Things just get kind of tossed around. So I needed to reshape them. And my favorite way to do that is just by soaking the basket first in some warm water. And I just like to add some soap in there so it can get disinfected as well. Just add those baskets to your warm water, and then after they've soaked for about 10 to 15 minutes, take them out and shape them with just old towels or rags or clothes that you're getting ready to donate. If you pull out your basket and there's a little bit of a sticky residue, that is just so the basket stays intact. Don't remove that because that keeps the basket in the shape now you're putting it in. From the biggest of the 3 baskets, I needed to make a hole for the light bulb. I just decided to use a puck light in this situation because there wasn't electricity from my ceiling already. So this is just the easiest way to do it. You could also use a USB rechargeable light. Make sure that everything is fitting nice and snug. To connect the pieces to each other, I just decided to use this wire here because it was similar enough in color that you wouldn't be able to notice. Cut the wire down to about the same length for each piece and then just twisted them in place at the same point. So then that way everything is even throughout and not lopsided. For the cord to make it look like it is going into the ceiling, I just grabbed one of these caps from Amazon that was very inexpensive and attached it. I love a woven pendant all year long, but I especially love it during spring and summer. Just gives off a really Tulum vacation vibe, but on a budget when you shop secondhand. For the next project is to make a storage side table with a succulent bowl on top. Because we have a hot tub, there are a lot of chemicals and testing that we have to do with it, and it needs to be by the hot tub, but I don't want to see it all the time. So I grabbed this large scale glass bowl from the thrift store, decided to paint it in this taupe color to better match the planter, and then I just sealed it because it was going to be going outside. And this bowl is what we'll be using to put our succulents inside. Went over to the hardware store and I grabbed some quick setting concrete, and we are just going to place this at the bottom of the bowl before we put the succulents in. Trimmed any of the bottoms of the succulents that were just a little bit too tall to make sure they would fit nicely inside of here. Rather than mix it separately, I just decided to mix it right inside of the bowl because it does set fairly quickly and I wanted to make sure I had enough time. Also taped off the sections that would allow me to equally spread out all of the succulents inside. Just added the tape in a grid shape and then added the succulents inside. And this is basically just part 1 of making your own succulent bowl using thrifted items. Super simple. But our goal in this project was to create some hidden storage in a beautiful way. In order to do that, I needed to have a basket or a planter that then the succulent bowl could sit on top and inside. Using this planter here, I added L brackets all around to make sure that it would sit upright. And then I took the drainage hole out of the bottom because there was just the slightest gap between the succulent bowl and then the planters. So if any rain did get inside, it would be able to come out the bottom. I love any project that is affordable, conceals storage in a beautiful way, and this one is definitely one I recommend trying. Another really great way to make your outdoor space look beautiful and feel just more lived in and inviting is to add lighting. These portable outdoor solar lamps from Pottery Barn are a small fortune. So if you ever come across pieces like this from your thrift store, just go to the Dollar Tree, go to Dollar General, grab a solar light from there and combine all of these pieces together. I just added some super glue to the top rim of this light here, so that way the solar light would stay in place and it would be able to catch from the sun. I can't really show you an example right now, obviously, because it's snowing outside, but I can't wait to use, I have 2 of these, I cannot wait to use these again this year. Another thing I like to do when I'm going into the high-end stores is I'm paying attention to the combinations, colors, textures, styles, sizes, all of the things. This hot pink color is all over Pottery Barn's website right now, and I love that combination of the aged brass vase with the hot pink florals. I kept my eyes out for a while for a round metal vase, but I wasn't finding exactly that. A glass vase that you might already have, or you could definitely find really affordably at your thrift store, are fishbowl style vases. They're usually pretty inexpensive because there's so many to choose from, and this vase here had a really similar silhouette to the one from Pottery Barn. So the challenge here is, how do we make a glass vase look metal? Everything always gets a good wipe down and disinfectant. Some metal does have a smoother texture than others, and the inspiration image definitely had a more textured metal, so I went in with some acrylic paint and some grout, mixed that together and applied 3 coats to make sure that it was completely covered only on the outside. The inside remains glass, which is great when you want to use real florals. Once all of those layers of texture dried, then it was just time to go in with all of the metallic spray paints. And I like to typically start out with black, and that is so when you add the brass on top of it and then you sand that down, the main color you're still seeing is brass, but there is some black in there as well. And I just kept referring back to that Pottery Barn image until I was happy with the end result. Adding more brass, adding more black, adding acrylic paints that were metallic as well, adding glaze if I needed to. I just kept working with it until I was happy with the end result. Now, unfortunately, I looked everywhere for hot pink peonies, and I thought for Valentine's Day I would be able to find them, but nobody had them, so I just decided to go with a floral that was really similar in color and added those to our now faux brass vase. Again, not identical, but I think I get a really similar look to the Pottery Barn version, but on a much tighter budget. And if your thrift store doesn't happen to have a fishbowl vase, if they have a bowling ball, you could also just use that. Now, you couldn't use it for real florals, but I've made floral arrangements using a bowling ball. You can also use these bowling balls to make oversized ornaments, or for spring, you could even cover this with moss. In this example, I covered it with a cement mix, so that way it would look semi-similar to this piece here from CB2, but for just $1. If you did the moss idea or the cement idea, just make sure you leave one of the holes open, so that way you have an area to place the stake inside, so that way it stays nice and put. The next project is really more of a friendly reminder to look past maybe the fake florals that you don't really love. If it's in a great planter, just remove those florals, remove some of that foam, take the foam out, add a glass vase, and then the money that you saved not buying the planter from Pottery Barn, not buying it from Crate and Barrel, you can buy fresh hydrangeas all summer long, and it can be beautiful and real and on a budget. If ever you're at the thrift store and you're on the fence about a piece of furniture, I always recommend using Google Lens so you can get some ideas about where the piece came from and what the piece is actually worth. So this specific cooler was selling on Amazon for over $200 and I just paid $5 for it. There were some things wrong with it, of course, so I had to go in with some appliance epoxy spray paint to the bottom of the cooler just to give it a fresh new look. Also needed to screw the top piece back in place, but for just $5 and maybe an hour of my time, I think it is well worth the savings. Last year, I was in desperate need of some new cushions for our love seat that we have outside. Whenever our screen was not put on our solo stove, it was basically just shooting out small embers out and burning our cushions essentially. And I was so irritated because we had just bought these and they were just getting ruined. So I was keeping my eyes out at the thrift store. I wasn't finding exactly what I was looking for, but nothing beats a free find. So when I found these on the side of the road, originally from Better Homes and Gardens, I instantly picked them up. After they dried out, I realized that they were damaged primarily in where they creased. So we just added some Dawn dish soap as well as power washed them, and they were really good as new. Just a friendly reminder, if the only problem with your outdoor cushions is they just look a little dingy and dirty, try to power wash them or use your hose on a jet setting, let them dry out in the sun, and you'd be so surprised how much better they will look. Because we had then had the solo stove in the middle of that love seat and chairs, I decided we were done with the solo stove and we just needed a coffee table. So at the thrift store, I found this coffee table here, which looks like it should just be a coffee table for the outdoors. So it was only $30, decided to pick it up. There were some obvious scuff marks on it, but nothing that couldn't be painted over. I tried to sand down any areas that were really uneven just to see really what I was working with. And then for the paint, I used this Storm Coat paint. I got it at Lowe's. It was pretty inexpensive. Ended up applying 2 coats and then sealing it with an outdoor matte clear sealer. And it's been holding up so well. I'm actually surprised at how well it's been holding up. So if you have a piece of furniture that maybe just needs painted over, I definitely recommend trying this one. If you happen to be someone like myself and you just hoard all of these faux florals and you don't want to donate them, try turning them into a wreath. Wildflower wreaths are very popular and they're kind of the perfect wreath to make if you just have a little bit of each type of floral. I was hoping to find a grapevine wreath that didn't have anything added to it, but because I didn't, I ended up picking up this wreath here and just removed the florals that were in place. I went through my spring stash of florals, just making sure to always follow the same pattern throughout until the wreath is completely covered. The only new thing I had to buy was the wreath form in the beginning, so this can be really inexpensive and a good way to use up all of those floral scraps. Because I wanted a side table that looked like it matched the coffee table, I was looking for an outdoor table I would be able to use. And while I did not find a table, I found this base to what I'm assuming was either a table or perhaps a bird bath. I thought this would make the perfect thing. What is nice about shopping the Goodwill outlet is anything over 10 pounds and as a glassware item then just becomes 25 cents a pound, which made the base of our table under $3.50. For the top, you could essentially use anything, but I just decided to use a stone round that I found at Menards, so that way it would all just feel like the same material, although it's not. Before connecting the pieces together, I just painted the base first so I could get to the very top. And then of course also painting that top piece there, just a nice way to add some cohesion to my back patio, but it was so affordable because I shopped secondhand. This is totally dependent on where you live, but here in Northeast Ohio, even though technically the first day of spring is in 3 weeks, we won't start to see things bloom until at least the beginning of May. So I need something to kind of bridge me to that point. And large scale potted faux florals can just be more than I really want to spend, especially because I know in just a few months we'll be able to see all this naturally for free.
I found several of these. I even left some behind because I thought there would be no way for me to go through all of them. I want to say that Bloom Room, that brand is a Joann's brand. They do say fall bushes, but these leaves look very typical rose leaves. The fact that I wanted to make a rose bush actually kind of works out really well. I think it's really just, again, in order for it to look more realistic, it has to have different kind of like variations in growth. So that's why I like, even when I'm purchasing faux stems, I like a really larger one, a smaller one, and then an even smaller one than that. I think it just makes it look more realistic. Taking some of these leaves off and adding some of these that I found, I found for $1 at the Hartville Thrift Shop. I'm going to take off some of these leaves, add some of these ones I found at the bins. And again, it's just variation in size, a little bit in color, and I think it just makes it look more realistic. I'm going to do that to all 7 of these using the scrap kind of roses that I have.
In order to weigh the florals down, making them really nice and sturdy, I just used some cement mixed that really well, and then added my arrangement.
Another thing now that all of these roses are kind of in place and they're not exactly the same color, but one way to kind of unify them is to do a watercolor technique. I've actually never done this on the channel before. It's just a really subtle way to add a little bit of color without it feeling overwhelming. You obviously still want things to look pretty natural.
But shopping the bins and just combining like things together can really get you to save a ton of money when you are in lieu of actual blooms.
So for the last, I would say probably 2 months, every time I've been at the Goodwill bins, I'll make it a point to really try to build a collection of florals that I think would look good together in a kind of faux potted situation. So the one from Home Goods or Marshalls was beautiful, but $79.99 is a little steep. I thought it would be maybe not the worst idea to weigh the pieces separately so you guys can see like about how much I spent. And I think it'd be good for me too to really get an idea like how much am I really even saving here. I found this bundle most recently at the Goodwill bins. Everything is $1.29 a pound for like housewares, clothes, all that kind of stuff. Glassware and books are separate, and so are like furniture items. So I've got my scale here. I don't even know if this will pick this up really, but we'll try. Not really picking it up. Let's try maybe a food scale. So after separating them, I have 4 of these total. Now, there's not like a tag on here that I can tell you guys how much or where they're from or anything like that. If I was to go out to, let's say, Hobby Lobby or Michael's and buy one of these, I feel like it would probably be, I don't know, $12 to $15. And then of course you can use a coupon. But I think for all of these 4 florals, if I had gone to a big box store, would be at least $30. So the fact that I was at the bins and it was just a few bucks is a major savings. Another thing I found at the bins was this pot here. This is what we're going to be adding the florals to, as well as some Quikrete, just to make sure the floral arrangement stays in place. Now, glassware pieces, like I said, are weighed 49 cents a pound, I believe. So let's see how much this guy is.
Same deal here, just grabbed a planter pot, mixed it up with some cement just right inside of that planter, added our faux geraniums and faux hydrangeas, and again, this is just going to tide me over until actual spring blooms come. Another way you can add that great ambiance to your outdoor living spaces is by adding portable lighting. So lighting like this that you can kind of move around where you need it to be is great, but hard to come by when you shop secondhand. So whenever you find little pieces like these, because they are metal, they are magnetic. And these lights that I'm showing here are going to attach to these because they are magnetic, which is just a nice thing to have. You could also do this indoors. If you find a set of 2 of these metal baskets, you can turn them into wall sconces, or you could just try to find anything that is metal that you can turn into a lantern. The lanterns from Pottery Barn are a small fortune. I have found an almost identical dupe at Home Goods, which is these are the ones that I have at my house, and I think they look so similar and are a fraction of the ones from Pottery Barn. And if you're looking for the exact same lantern for outside maybe, I would definitely go the Home Goods route instead of the thrift store. I've never seen anything that I'd be able to put outside that is exactly the same, just in different sizes. But if you're just in need of one, I recommend just seeing what you can come up with, piecing some different things together. So I found this plant stand at the Goodwill outlet, as well as this waste bin. First, just going to tighten this screw because it was a little bit wobbly, and then I'm going to remove this rubber piece that's meant to, I think, protect the floor from this waste bin so that I can spray paint it. Gave it a good clean, and then I first, because it's metal, went in with this self-etching primer that's meant to bond to metals. It's supposed to prevent scratching, and it does really give you a good base to go on when you go to add your black spray paint or whatever. I feel that when I skip this step, things scratch off way easier. So I definitely recommend using the self-etching primer if you're spray painting anything that's metal. Once that coat dried, I then went over that with some spray paint that is meant for outdoors because this would be going outside. For the candle, I also found 2 of these Luminara candles that flicker, which is a nice feature to have, but one of them was broken. They look so similar to the ones from Pottery Barn, but I paid less than $1 for it. Another material more associated with spring and summer than fall and winter, I would say, is jute. So there's an infinite, really, number of things you can do with jute rope. In this example, I'm showing how to make a jute rope trivet using one of the foam wreath forms from the Dollar Tree. Taking my heat tool, I added a small hole for the jute end to be placed inside of, so it would be nice and seamless. Added a small dab of hot glue to the inside of that hole before placing the end of the jute rope cording, and then continued to wrap the jute around this wreath form here. At no point do I cut the jute rope. I'm basically just taking it from the spool and applying it, adding hot glue every so often to make sure that it's staying the way I'm intending it to, and I'm not going to be left with any open spaces. Added this decorative hardware here so that way it could be hung up on a peg rail if it's not in use at that moment. You can do this in small scale projects like these. I've even wrapped entire tables with jute rope cording. So there's really an infinite number of things you can do with this material that will really give off that spring summer vibe. So now let's talk about some colors. Specifically for summer, I think the primary color we all think of when we think of summer is blue. And when you are focusing on high-end stores, it's not this blue, it's more subdued tones of blue. And you can mix those tones together. So when I found this blue vase here, it was the perfect thing, honestly, to find because it needed no DIYs. I then thrifted some faux florals. I also like to pay attention to the exact faux florals they're using. Hydrangeas are very common. Queen Anne's lace is another one. So I just grabbed any of the ones from my stash as well as just ones that I've thrifted previously and combined them together. You can get a really similar look if you're on a budget. You definitely don't need to shop retail. Now let's talk about Easter specific decor. So I keep bunnies out. Easter's really late this year specifically, so I'll probably put out like the moss bunny and all of those other decorations when we get closer to Easter. But one reason I love going in physically to Pottery Barn is you get so much great inspiration for tablescape settings. However, I try to find pieces that I can use for both spring and summer. So for example, this striped light blue and white runner from Pottery Barn is beautiful, but it's also kind of pricey. So when I went to the thrift store, I found some fabric that kind of resembled that pattern and then pressed it with an iron first, buzzed it through the sewing machine. And I would never think to put the runners in that orientation had I not gone to Pottery Barn. So that's why I like to go. I think you can get a lot of different inspiration. And if you just tailor that to what you can find at the thrift store, you can get really close. In one of the setups, they had 2 glass vases with faux pink florals, but because I've saved money in other areas, I found these glass vases at the thrift store, grabbed some tulips from my local grocery store, a very affordable and now real arrangement, which is always better, especially if you're hosting and you have it in the budget. Also found, again, that woven material. These are gonna be good for both spring and summer, that light blue tone. Grabbed these really unique and beautiful plates that definitely had some scratches, and you guys told me about Barkeeper's Friend, and that worked so well. So anytime you see maybe a really great set of plates but they're just scratched up a bit, definitely try Barkeeper's Friend because it works well. And of course, we're going to add more pieces when Easter comes, but this is just a nice starting off point, and everything is thrifted. It doesn't have to cost a fortune, and it can still be really beautiful. And also, all of these pieces can be used in summer as well. I would swap the florals, add more maybe coastal decor instead. But because this was an Easter setup, I found this sweet little bunny candle here. Could have left it a bunny candle, but wanted to add a bowl to it so I could place it on my tablescape. Because the bowl was too heavy, I needed to fill the bunny with sand, sanded it down, and then taped off the bottom. And then now it would be able to sit upright. Also added some hot glue to the bottom so that way it wouldn't scratch my table. Now it's just time for paint. So I just went in with one of my favorites. You guys know if you follow the channel regularly, I just went in with Shiplap by Magnolia Home. And now I can place anything in here that is of course not food related. If you want it to be food related, just make sure the paint that you're using is food safe. Now's really the time, guys, when you're at the thrift store to look for planters. Once it really starts warming up outside, especially here in Ohio, everybody is just dying to get out there and take an inventory of everything that they have. But often I find that during this time of year is when you can find planters that just need a really good cleaning. Sometimes it's really all it is. And that's exactly what these hanging planters were. These, even from Wayfair, a set of 2 of these is almost $60. So just save yourself $55 and shop them secondhand, spend 10 minutes to clean them, and then you can use these inside, you can use these outside, and you can save a significant amount of money when you shop secondhand. The next project is really just styling accessories I don't want you guys to skip on if you find them that seem more spring and summer related. So we've already talked about several, like tennis rackets, maybe some things that are not as obvious, rain boots, any tinted glassware that is pink, green, blue, definitely reads more spring and summer. These were from Kohl's originally. I found both of them on a separate occasion, and I was able to save like $60 because I shopped secondhand. You could use these as vases and split them up, or you could use them together with some candles. Lots of options here, but definitely worth checking out. Also, any gardening supplies I wanted to make sure to include in this category. So little mini shovels or seed packets or watering cans, bird houses, all of that kind of stuff displayed in a strategic way can make your space feel a little bit more that it's been styled with intention for the upcoming season. Other things, if you find them at your thrift store, any woven basket. These are great for styling other accessories as a base. Any tea towels that have any linear stripes that are in that light blue color, white pitchers, If you can collect these and put them all together, that can look really beautiful. Fill these with fresh, real flowers. This style of basket as well, I believe these are called gathering baskets. I find these all the time at the thrift store. You can use them to display food, display flowers. There's so many different options with a basket like this if you wanted to make it into a centerpiece, but it can be so affordable when you shop secondhand. If you are not coming up with any great luck at your thrift store for wreaths, but you find a great spring garland or even just a eucalyptus garland, add some florals from your stash and you can create also a really beautiful wreath. Grab a nice big wreath form. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention in the second project is to make sure that you're spraying. If these are going outside, make sure you spray them with a UV resistant spray paint so that way they don't turn your green leaves blue. Another material that is definitely more, I would say, summer than anything else is specifically white rope because it just reads, I think, kind of nautical. In this example that I'm sharing, I took a styrofoam ball and an old leather belt, some of this white cording here, wrapped the ball in the cording and added a leather detail handle. But you could apply this exact concept with both the jute and this rope cording to really anything. You could wrap a picture frame around with this cording, or you could even do the whole bowling ball idea. There's even cording that's already braided, giving it a more detailed, elevated look that I think I'm gonna do in an upcoming project. So if you see a spool of white rope at the bottom of your bins at the thrift store, now is really the time to pick it up. Another material that is definitely more summer than anything else is, of course, seashells. And Pottery Barn does it in a way that still feels more sophisticated. And you can definitely do that same thing through DIY. So I found this vase at the Dollar Tree. You do want it to be a vase that is similar in shape to this one. And then I also grabbed the seashells as well from the Dollar Tree. I started off by spray painting the vase white, and then I started at the top using the smallest seashells in the bags that I got from the Dollar Tree, and then I just hot glued those on to where they would be in contact with the other seashells and the vase. As I went further down, I chose seashells that were progressively bigger, so that way when the vase was at its widest point, I would have the biggest shells there, and then as we got down again to the bottom, we would use some of the smaller seashells. Now, of course, you could do this to a vase like I'm showing here, or you could do this to a thrifted lamp that you find. I think the key here is less is more. So if this is the shell object that you have, I would say maybe one, definitely not more than two, will definitely give off a more sophisticated summer feel. While I definitely prefer to use real florals when you can. There's just times and places where having a little faux floral is just easier. And this is one of those examples. Faux potted ferns in a bathroom that has no natural light is a better option. So from the Dollar Tree, you want to avoid those ferns. You're going to look for these. For this project, I also combined it with these that I thrifted. You could use a bowl from the Dollar Tree, or I just had this one on hand, so just decided to use that to save a little bit of money there. We're going to give it a whole textured effect. So we're gonna do the stone spray paint, or you can do the grout technique as well. Again, this stone spray paint, it works, it just takes forever to dry. So for the sake of time, I would recommend a different medium. Used every spray paint I could to get that look. And while I'm doing this, I'm constantly looking and referring back to the picture of the planter that I'm trying to really replicate. Anything that has that frosted glass, but also those white patches, almost that like salt has dried on them kind of look, that is all throughout Pottery Barn all summer long. So you can definitely create that look using some frosted spray paint, maybe dabbing on white patches of acrylic paint. Of course, sand is another main material for summer. For this project, I took some hurricane vases. I also found these fluted candle holders that we're gonna place inside of the hurricane vases. I just spray painted them with some white spray paint. And with the hurricane vases, I just used some frosted glass spray paint that works really well. I also just wanted to add a detail to the top, so I just grabbed some metallic brass spray paint, sprayed that into a cup, then taking a foam brush, just adding a small amount to the very top. Placed the candle holder inside and then filled with sand. And that really wrapped it up for this project. You could use these as vases, candle holders. Again, you could add the white patches. This is just one of many, I'm sure, ideas to get you started. If you are someone like myself and you have always so many leftover clear ornaments from Christmas, now might be a good time to see if you can make use of those. So I placed several clear ornaments on kebab sticks and then just took them outside, spray painted them with the frosted glass spray paint, and then just a little bit of white spray paint just to give that salted appearance. Took, again, jute rope, and we are just going to thread these through. Using my heat tool, I made holes at the bottoms of all of the ornaments so that way they would be able to connect to one another. If you don't have a heat tool, my suggestion would be to take a small screw and your drill and just gently screw it in from the bottom, and then you can widen that hole as much as you need in order to be able to thread it through. Or if you have a hot glue gun that gets really hot, like piping hot, I would just then place that at the bottom to melt the plastic down so that way you can thread through. I also removed the top sections to make them look more like beads instead of ornaments, and then just tied a knot after each one. Definitely not perfect, but if you have all of these materials, this can kind of be free. So definitely worth trying. You can probably find something that looks like this at HomeGoods for the $20 price point, but if you have all the supplies already, just make it yourself. Another material that definitely makes me think more of summer than any other season is cork. You can find cork actually pretty often at the thrift store, maybe not in the way you always want to. In this case, I found them in the form of placemats, and I'm just going to cut out sections to wrap around this box. I traced out each of the sides, cut those down, applied those with hot glue until all of the sides were completely covered. Because the cork was quite thick, I didn't go all the way up on the bottom just to make sure that it would still be able to close appropriately. For a decorative touch, I added these brass corner brackets to each of the corners to the top of the box, and it was just an easy, very straightforward project, perfect for summer and shelf styling, but on a budget. When it comes to faux trees, not everybody has a green thumb, and sometimes it is nice to just have something that always looks nice and doesn't need to be made. These can be really expensive. So when I found this tree, haven't found a tree since, but I found this tree at the Goodwill outlet that definitely needed some TLC, weighed it over 10 pounds, so then becomes half off, makes it a really affordable project. What is nice about trees like this is basically, in like any faux stem, they have these small connector pieces that when you pull the stems off, these then can slide right on. And eucalyptus, I would say, is a floral that really can be year round, but I really love it for spring and summer especially. But then once summer is over and maybe you want an oversized fall specific tree, you just take the eucalyptus off, maybe add some red maple leaves instead. So I like pieces like this that can change with the seasons by only adjusting one component. Something that is not necessarily summer or spring, But something that you will find to DIY during this time of year at Dollar Tree are hula hoops. And that might sound strange, but if you're looking for large scale artwork, I've made a few different projects using hula hoops and some heavy duty poster board. And the first steps are basically always the same, which is just to remove that sticker that the hula hoop is covered in, grab 2 poster boards from the Dollar Tree, connect those together with duct tape, and then you will want to hot glue your hula hoop onto both of them. So in this example, I took coffee filters, still have this in my daughter's space. I folded them, and when you do that and you press them onto the poster board, eventually it just looks almost like a giant flower. And then all that's left to do is just cut out the remainder of the poster board and hang it up. This is really great in kids' spaces, especially because it's so lightweight, takes up a ton of space, adds a ton of texture to the wall, but is so cost effective because it's an entirely Dollar Tree project. During the summer months, my space just seems to feel a lot lighter, and it's those easy swaps. Like, this is an easy example. I use this Lazy Susan all the time, but during the spring and summer months, making selections that are a little bit more delicate and lighter is always a good idea, just to again infuse that seasonality. So I found this Lazy Susan that didn't have anything inside of it, and then I also found this metal tray here. Now, it was scratched up pretty badly, so I didn't feel bad about spray painting over it. I loved those detail handles there. They reminded me almost of bows, so I just wanted to keep that detail as much as possible, so I taped those off. Because this was going to be going on an island, I decided to go in with a satin, not chalk style spray paint, so that way it would be wipeable. Gave a few generous coats until everything was really well covered to both the front and the back. And then all that's left to do is to remove the tape. Now, somehow, some way, some of the paint still gets on these handles. So when that happens, you can either take goof off, just a small amount on a Q-tip, or a nail polish remover that is 100% acetone will help remove any of that paint. All that's left to do after wiping it down is just to connect the 2 pieces together. And it was basically like it was meant to be the perfect fit, and I think it is the perfect thing to put out for spring. If you're someone like myself who is comfortable thrifting textiles that you can wash in your washing machine, I always recommend just checking. For example, I found this pillow that's actually meant to be outdoors for just 50 cents. I loved the pattern. It felt very vintage inspired, like something Studio McGee would sell for a lot more than 50 cents. And it gives me all of those colors that are perfect for summer, but a pattern that's beautiful for spring. If you have more, let's say, time than money, a project like this, I found this picnic bench on the side of the road when we lived in Scottsdale, and it was in rough shape. And I spent so much time sanding this down and gave it a whole new life. So with projects like these, yes, they are an investment in your time, but the end result is so beautiful that you can even sell it for profit or keep it for yourself. I kept this for a while, and then I ended up selling it on Facebook Marketplace, and you can definitely just search on Facebook Marketplace free. And there's oftentimes so many things that people just don't need anymore that they're getting rid of, that you could spend some time maybe refurbishing and bringing it back to life. And last but not least, just don't forget about the power of just fresh flowers in a glass vase. You could even do this for free. You can paint the vase if you have spray paint, or just grab any old vase from the Dollar Tree for $1.25. Go outside, grab some fresh clippings. Now in Ohio, it is March, so there's not a whole lot to choose from, but come mid-May, that's gonna be a very different conversation, and you can create an arrangement for essentially nothing. Or if you do have it in the budget, Trader Joe's is one of my favorite places to source really great florals, and if you just have $5 to spare, you can just pop some fresh florals in there, and that will make your space instantly feel more like spring and summer. With all that being said, that really wraps it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching and taking a look back with me on these spring and summer projects. I think sometimes it's nice to just corral all of these items in one place, in one video, so that way when you're at the thrift store, you can go in with those ideas fresh in your mind. I hope that everybody is having a fantastic week, and I will see you back here next Sunday. Bye for now.